The church is in a town in southern Nigeria where I once lived. The wedding is scheduled for 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. At 20 minutes past 10, the bride from the previous episode walks down the aisle on her father's arm. The groom waits at the altar. The pastor stands before them in white vestments. Both families fill the church. Other guests have traveled from nearby towns and from the cities abroad where members of the two families now live. The bride's mother sits in the front row with her younger sister beside her. She watches the ceremony carefully while also keeping track of who has arrived. The pastor begins with Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God gives you. He reads the verse twice and preaches on it for 23 minutes. He tells the couple that their marriage will depend on remembering what their parents and grandparents have done for them. He reminds them that honoring one's parents is one of the 10 commandments, and that the commandment includes a promise of long life. The mother has heard versions of this sermon many times. The pastor has led her church for 31 years. He baptized her children, conducted her mother-in-law's funeral, and officiated at her oldest daughter's wedding. He is also being paid an honorarium for today's ceremony. The money comes from the wedding budget, which includes funds and gifts provided by the groom's family. The mother sees the payment as a normal part of the event. The church is providing the building, the pastor, the ceremony, and the religious recognition of the marriage. The household, the wedding, the pastor, and the people described here are composites. The details come from many real weddings and households in southern Nigeria. No single ceremony is being portrayed. This episode examines how religious teaching supports the obligations that have appeared throughout the first 3 episodes. Those teachings did not begin with this pastor or this church. Christianity teaches children to honor their parents. The commandment appears in Exodus and again in Deuteronomy. Catholic and Lutheran traditions number it as the 5th commandment. Reformed and Eastern Orthodox traditions number it as the 4th. The numbering changes, the instruction remains the same. Islam also places a strong obligation on children to care for and respect their parents. In Surah Al-Isra, the Quran instructs believers to treat their parents with kindness and to avoid speaking to them with contempt. Surah Luqman recalls the physical suffering of the mother during pregnancy and weaning and calls on the believer to show gratitude to both God and the parents. A hadith recorded in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim tells of a man who asks the Prophet Muhammad who deserves his best companionship. The Prophet answers, "Your mother," 3 times before adding, "then your father." Confucian thought calls the obligation xiao, usually translated as filial piety. The teaching asks children to respect and care for parents and elders. It shaped family life and political order in China for centuries and continues to influence families across East Asia. Hindu traditions include Pitru Rin, the debt owed to one's ancestors. A person repays that debt through marriage, children, family continuity, and rituals for the dead. Buddhist traditions also teach filial responsibility, particularly in the forms of Buddhism that developed across China, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Across many African religious traditions, relationships with parents continue after death through the ancestors. Families pour libations, offer food, hold festivals, and consult ancestors before major decisions. Yoruba Egungun traditions honor ancestors who remain involved in the lives of their descendants. Igbo families invoke ancestors during celebrations such as Iriji. Akan and Ewe traditions also maintain obligations between the living and those who came before them. Across these traditions, the child enters life with responsibilities to parents, elders, or ancestors. Those responsibilities may include respect, obedience, care, money, labor, ritual, and the continuation of the family line. Religious teaching gives these responsibilities moral authority. A child may support a parent because the parent needs help. The child may also believe that refusing support would violate a commandment, dishonor the family, anger an ancestor, or place the child outside the moral expectations of the community. This is how religion enters the household system described in this series. It gives spiritual meaning to obligations that also have economic consequences. In Nigerian Pentecostal Christianity, one of the clearest financial obligations is tithing. The Redeemed Christian Church of God was founded in 1952 by Josiah Akindayomi and has been led since 1981 by Enoch Adeboye. The church now has parishes across Nigeria and in many other countries. Living Faith Church Worldwide, also known as Winners Chapel, was founded by David Oyedepo in 1981. It has branches across Nigeria, other African countries, Europe, and the United States. Other major Pentecostal churches include Christ Embassy, the Synagogue Church of All Nations, Deeper Life Bible Church, and Mountain of Fire and Miracles Ministries. These churches differ in doctrine and organization, but many teach that members should give 10% of their income to the church. Some pastors have attached serious spiritual consequences to the failure to tithe. Bishop David Oyedepo has taught that tithing is necessary for financial prosperity and that refusing to tithe places a person outside the covenant through which prosperity comes. Pastor Enoch Adeboye taught for years that people who refuse to tithe might not enter heaven. In October of 2024, Adeboye publicly withdrew that claim. He said that he had been wrong to teach that non-tithers would be excluded from heaven. The apology spread quickly through Nigerian media and social platforms. Other church leaders responded, and some continued to defend tithing as a binding spiritual obligation. The argument matters because tithing moves part of a household's income into the religious institution every month. For a wealthy household, 10% may be manageable. For a household paying school fees, rent, medical bills, remittances, and support for extended family, the same 10% can carry a much greater cost. Pentecostal churches are only one part of Nigeria's religious economy. Catholic parishes collect offerings and contributions and operate schools, hospitals, and charitable programs. Muslim communities practice zakat, the required giving of a portion of wealth to eligible recipients, as well as sadaqah, voluntary charity. Traditional religious practices also require offerings, sacrifices, festival contributions, and payments to priests or shrines. A household may participate in several of these systems at once. A family may attend a Pentecostal church, send children to a Catholic school, contribute to traditional ceremonies in the village, and maintain Muslim relatives through another side of the family. Religion is therefore part of the household budget. Weddings are one place where that relationship becomes visible. The family pays for the church or mosque ceremony. It may pay an honorarium to the pastor, priest, or imam. It may contribute to a building fund. It may be expected to provide food, clothing, transportation, gifts, and donations connected to the ceremony. The religious institution gives the marriage public and spiritual recognition. The household pays for the services and expectations attached to that recognition. Funerals create another large set of expenses. An Igbo funeral in southern Nigeria can cost several million naira. Some cost much more. The body may remain in a mortuary for weeks or months while relatives gather money. Contributions come from children, siblings, extended family, friends, professional associations, village groups, churches, and relatives abroad. The burial may include a church service, ceremonies at the family compound, wake keeping, food, music, clothing, transport, and traditional rites. Pastors, churches, priests, musicians, caterers, mortuaries, and other service providers all receive payment. The family often understands the expense as a final act of honor toward the dead. The same principle applies during life. Children support parents because the family expects it and because religious teaching presents care for parents as a moral duty. The church also receives money from those same children through tithes, offerings, pledges, ceremonies, and special collections. Both obligations come from the household's income. In northern Nigeria, religious law also influences marriage, inheritance, sexuality, and criminal justice. Between 1999 and 2002, 12 northern states introduced forms of Sharia criminal law alongside Nigeria's federal and state legal systems. Zamfara moved first under Governor Ahmad Sani Yerima. Other states followed, including Kano, Sokoto, Katsina, Kebbi, Jigawa, Yobe, Bauchi, Borno, Gombe, Niger, and Kaduna, although the scope of implementation differed across states. The case of Amina Lawal became one of the best-known examples. Lawal was a divorced woman living in Katsina State. After giving birth in 2002 outside a recognized marriage, she was convicted of zina, unlawful sexual relations, and sentenced to death by stoning. Her pregnancy was treated as evidence of the offense. The Sharia Court of Appeal overturned the conviction in 2003. The ruling focused on legal and procedural problems, including the composition of the original court and questions about when the pregnancy began in relation to her divorce. Hawa Ibrahim led Lawal's defense. Ibrahim, a lawyer from Gombe State, became known internationally for representing women in Sharia cases. The European Parliament awarded her the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought in 2005. Amina Lawal's case was one of several during the early years of Sharia criminal law in northern Nigeria. Safia Hussaini also received a sentence of death by stoning before winning her appeal. Other defendants received sentences involving flogging or amputation. These cases show how religious law can move beyond private belief and become part of the state's power over bodies, marriage, sexuality, and punishment. Religious authority also influences family life in other countries, although the law and practice differ from place to place. Comparable questions appear in parts of Mali, Cameroon, Mauritania, Sudan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia. The details vary. The central issue is the same. Religious authority can determine which family arrangements are legitimate, who may marry, how inheritance is distributed, and what happens when a person violates the accepted rules. Nigerian writers and public figures have examined these relationships from many positions. Wole Soyinka has written for decades about religion, politics, fear, and public authority in Nigeria. Matthew Hassan Kukah, the Catholic Bishop of Sokoto, speaks regularly about religion, governance, poverty, and violence in northern Nigeria. Ifedayo Olarinde, known as Daddy Freeze, built a large public following by criticizing Pentecostal tithing and prosperity preaching. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie has written about religion within Nigerian family life. In Purple Hibiscus, Catholic devotion exists alongside violence inside the household. In Americana, Pentecostal Christianity appears within the social and economic life of the Nigerian middle class. Buchi Emecheta also documented the meeting of religion, marriage, migration, and family obligation in the joys of motherhood and second-class citizen. These writers do not make the same argument. Together, their work shows how deeply religion enters Nigerian family life, public life, and economic life. The current religious system developed through several historical periods. Christian missionary organizations expanded across West Africa during the 19th and 20th centuries. They established churches, schools, clinics, and new systems of education and social authority. African communities already had obligations to elders, ancestors, shrines, and lineage institutions. Christianity reorganized many of those relationships around churches, clergy, mission schools, and Christian ceremonies. In northern Nigeria, the Sokoto Caliphate had already established Islamic legal, educational, and political institutions before British rule. Usman Dan Fodio's jihad began in 1804. The Caliphate governed much of the region until the British conquest in 1903. British indirect rule preserved parts of the emirate system. The influence of that history remains visible in the religious and political organization of northern Nigeria today. A third major development was the growth of Pentecostal Christianity from the 1970s onward. The movement developed from earlier African Christian traditions, including the Aladura churches, and from ministries such as that of Benson Idahosa in Benin City. Pentecostal churches grew rapidly during the economic crisis of the 1980s and 1990s. As public schools, hospitals, employment systems, and other state services weakened, churches provided community, assistance, education, health programs, and hope. Those services were supported by the money and labor of church members. The household relied more heavily on the church. The church relied more heavily on the household. That relationship continues. At the wedding, the pastor finishes the service at 12:30. He blesses the couple. The congregation stands. The bride and groom walk back down the aisle as husband and wife. The mother follows them out of the church with her sister and husband. The bride's older brother has flown in from Houston. His return flight leaves in 3 days. The reception will take place at a hotel in the next town. Cars are already lined up in the church car park to carry the families there. At the reception, the master of ceremonies will announce the cash gifts from different relatives, friends, and community groups. The largest gift will come from the brother who lives in Houston. He will also be expected to help with the house the groom's family is building for the couple. He will continue sending money home after he returns to Texas. He understands this as a family obligation. Religion has helped shape the language through which that obligation is understood, even when he does not think of each transfer as a religious act. I know this experience. I have sat in churches while a pastor blessed a marriage that the families had already negotiated in private. I have heard the commandment to honor one's parents read at weddings, funerals, and naming ceremonies. I believe the teaching, and I also watched families use it when asking children for labor, obedience, money, and sacrifice. For a long time, I did not know how to hold those two experiences together. At times, I stopped attending church. At other times, I continued attending while keeping my questions to myself. I eventually left Nigeria. From the United States, I can examine the teaching outside the immediate authority of the church and household in which I first received it. The distance does not settle every question. It gives me room to ask what the teaching has required, who has benefited from it, and what it has cost the people expected to obey it. The next episode examines how these household, marital, and religious expectations are assigned differently to daughters and sons.